and they can't be touched
$100 million.
because their goddamn rights are
3,176 people arrested, 132 policemen injured, 1,576 businesses looted or set on fire. And yet it started innocently. At first it seemed like 1965 all over again, New Yorkers pitching in to help each other. Jeff Kamen was on the street with an Action News film crew soon after the lights went out.
Less than an hour after the electric light failed, individual New Yorkers in most neighborhoods were directing traffic. But in the worst slums of the city, the light of mindless violence lit up the sky as the blackout divided the town into two societies, separate and unequal. In the Bronx, in Harlem, in South Jamaica, in Brooklyn, many of the have-nots abandoned whatever restraint had kept them in check. Tens of thousands of poor became a disorganized army of the night. Others hustled too.
Last few candles going. This is it, the last few candles of the day, right?
What price are you asking for them?
Well, I was selling boxes for $3 a box, or these for 50 cents each.
Isn't that a bit of a ripoff?
No, not really. Well, it's there's a blackout going on, and people are going for it.
It was party time on Manhattan's fashionable East Side, an evening of quick, easy friendships. Outside a luxury apartment house, I found friendly neighbors. Where were you when the lights went out?
I was in a class at NYU, and the professor said she thought we could go home.
And you, sir?
I was lounging in my easy chair watching a hell of a good movie. But fortunately, I keep an emergency bag that I take up in the North Woods, and I reached in and turned on all my lights.
We could all learn a lesson from you. Where were you, sir?
I was looking for my old lady.
Where were you when the lights went out?
The lights went out. I was in the movies in seeing This Side of Midnight. And it was a terrific movie and a great sexy scene, and it suddenly blacked out, and everybody almost fainted.
But there was no party at Bellevue Hospital. The blackout there triggered an immediate life and death crisis. The blackout of 1965 forced hospitals to install backup generators. Bellevue's failed. Only fast work by teams of firemen and emergency service cops got power into emergency rooms and intensive care wards in time to fight off death. Doctors and nurses had to use primitive hand-powered airbags to keep alive 15 patients who had been on electrically powered respirators. Just as this woman was being rushed in with a miscarriage, a healthy 7.5-pound baby girl was being celebrated in the obstetrics wing. She had been delivered from darkness into the light of an emergency generator, carried in by a fireman at the last moment. North of the civilized, ordered compassion of the blacked-out hospital, thousands of East Harlem residents had taken to the streets in an orgy of looting and burning that shocked many of their neighbors. For it was not only the hardened criminals, the known felons of Spanish Harlem, who had joined the human locust swarm. The cover of total darkness allowed the lowest qualities of previously peaceful people to surface. At first, there was only sporadic rock and bottle throwing at police. Later, there were shots fired. The cops were hard-pressed to keep cool.
Looting, people running, shots being fired, you know.
At you?
Right, you can see you come out of the block, you know, towards our direction.
More than 3,000 people were arrested during the blackout. Street cops tell me that was but a small fraction of the reality. Tens of thousands learned crime can pay.
These are not the tools of a community affairs officer, but Detective Mike Williams has had to use them tonight. Why?
It's strange, Jeff. Years ago, 1965, right? The first blackout, I was a rookie in the 2-5. And at that particular time, everybody out there in the street was trying to help somebody. This time, it's all different. It seems like they've just gone wild. But tonight, even now, if you go down on 96th Street, south of 96th Street, you see John Q. Citizen out there in his white clothes, so he can be seen by the traffic lights, directing traffic. I was in a 2-4, and 3 people came up and said, "What can we do to volunteer?" It was really something, you know.
But once you move north of 96th Street into the ghetto,
I don't say ghetto. It's just they have an idea. It seems like it seems like if it ever happens again, we're gonna get it.
As it was, their violence was directed at property. There was not so much as one single case of a mob attacking and beating an innocent bystander or a cop, although many police officers were wounded by thrown bottles and bricks. And there was the case of Detective Richard Buggy, who was still hospitalized with possible spinal damage, thanks to being thrown down a flight of stairs by looters who were trying to escape arrest. One cop trying to capture a looter was shot and wounded in the Bronx. At Brooklyn Jewish Hospital and Medical Center, emergency generators failed. Surgical teams and emergency service personnel set up a makeshift field hospital in the parking lot. The fire department rushed in high-intensity spotlights. One nurse described it like wartime and said, "We're at the battlefront." Boxes of gauze bandages were stacked on a station wagon. Soiled sheets, bottles of disinfectant, and litters were piled nearby. And in the middle, surgeons, nurses, and orderlies worked on a seemingly endless flow of patients. Glass cuts, knife wounds, injuries of violence on New York's darkest night.
I was working 2 murders on the 4 phones on my desk at police headquarters when it suddenly happened. For the first few seconds, I didn't give it any thought. What the hell, I told myself, they'll come back on. I then turned in my chair, looked out the window in the direction of Wall Street, the financial district, the World Trade Center, and the Brooklyn Bridge. Everything was pitch black. My God, I remembered saying, it's a blackout. With the aid of a match, I immediately dialed my city desk. They too were experiencing the same eerie feelings. Thanks, Pat, my editor said, get all you can. The next 7 hours were hell and sweat. With the help of 4 candles I located in my locker, I began dialing the police precincts in the boroughs I knew from past experience would be the hardest hit in terms of looting. The devastation wreaked upon businesses in the hours of darkness that followed could not be imagined in one's wildest dreams. When human beings suddenly turned into animals and robbed, looted, wrecked, and burned homes to the tune of millions of dollars, news of which people in the civilized world could not possibly believe, a hardened police reporter had only one thought in mind: get the story. Gathering the information, which would be page 1 for days to follow in newspapers throughout the country, wasn't exactly easy. The illumination of the candles wasn't bright enough. On 3 occasions, I burned the index fingers of both hands, dialing various precincts. Upmost in mind were the victims of muggings trapped in darkened subway trains, underground, and vehicles inching their way through tunnels, and persons stuck on elevators were also major challenges. I phoned a total of 55 precincts and commands to get news on the blackout. I had presumed mistakenly, fortunately, that a record number of homicides would be committed. The animals were having a field day, and they couldn't care less about murders, which unfortunately New York has an average of 4 a day. My lunch hour came and went. I couldn't care less. Thousands of off-duty policemen volunteered their help by calling their commands and reporting for duty. News reporters and photographers were no exception. Despite all the hardships, the news, holding to truest tradition of newspaper profession and with Mike O'Neill at the helm, published 40,000 copies. The time of the blackout was 9:34 p.m. It will be remembered forever.
What magazine do millions of readers all over the world turn to each week? Time, of course. People read Time for what's in it and what they get out of it. You'll be informed because inside you'll meet the rich and the poor, the bad and the beautiful, the high and the mighty. In Time, you'll meet the butcher, the baker, and the troublemaker. Happy, Squeaky, and Doc. Faith, Hope, and Charity. Lincolns, Fords, and Chevys. With Time, every week you get ham, eggs, and juice. Time lets you know what people are thinking, because what certain people are thinking influences whether the world is at peace or war. Time doesn't stand still. With correspondents all over the world, we can call the balls and the strikes, the crime and the punishment. And what we see, you see. Whether it's on the battlefield or playing field, we'll tell you who's dropping the ball and who's running with it. And whether it's in front of the camera or behind the curtain, in art galleries or in the fashion shows, Time will be there. And so will you, because Time covers what you're interested in. And now you can receive Time for only half price at our money-saving basic subscription price of 50 cents an issue, half the newsstand price. So for only $12, you can receive 24 issues of Time. Just call this toll-free number, 800-621-8200. You'll save 50%. Call now so you start right, on time. The offer is half price. The phone call is free. To receive 24 issues of Time for only $12, call this toll-free number now, 800-621-8200, or write Time, Time Life Building, Chicago, Illinois, 60611.
For those of us who waited through the long night, dawn on the morning of July the 14th was a welcome sight. The blackness of a starless night was slowly illuminated by a bright sun. But the light of day didn't improve what we saw. It brought home the sickening reality that some New Yorkers had taken advantage of the city's blindness. They ran through the streets in an orgy of robbery and arson. It's impossible to describe the pandemonium on the streets of Harlem, the South Bronx, or Bushwick. But if you had driven with us that day, this is some of what you would have seen and heard.
What time is this news on?
10 o'clock. Okay. Oh,
The lights went out at 9:30, and there was a dead silence for possibly 3 to 5 minutes, and suddenly a yell came up from the street. The sound of I guess it must have been 1,000 voices, just at a scream of exultation. I don't know, really. And I said to Belle, my wife, oh, the lights are out, and I think there's going to be hell to pay tonight. But then we didn't hear any more, and we didn't think any more about it until about midnight. And at midnight, we heard the sounds of feet in the street. You couldn't see the faces. All you could hear was the sound of feet running and the sound of, and then the sound of glass being smashed or the storefronts being ripped open. The noise was frightening. The noise must have been like it was in Nazi Germany in 1932 when the stormtroopers invaded the homes of people and ripped them out. Here they were invading the places of business. This store wasn't hit.
What did you think while you and your wife were inside and you were listening to these sounds of what you thought were, I guess, the end of your business?
That all your years of work can be wiped out in a minute by just one kid with a milk box to throw through your window, or 5 kids to tear down the gate or to do the looting.
Why didn't you come down?
I think I was afraid. I had a strong feeling that it was like a witch's night outside and it wasn't the proper place for people to be walking. At 3 o'clock in the morning when I was
just about terrified because I started to yell out the window at the looters going past with the pieces of furniture and things like that. And at 3 o'clock in the morning, I got a telephone call from a young man who works for me here. He said, "You're okay, boss?" He said, and there's 8 of us sitting outside the store. He said, all the guys from the neighborhood are sitting there drinking beer, and we're watching it. So that was a something that helped my doubts and my worries. Just about the same time, they smashed the window in the bar next door. They smashed and looted the window of the hardware store 3 doors away, and also the Spanish grocery a couple of doors away. There was an attempt made on the liquor store directly across the street, but a young man who really deserves mention, the guard in 733 over there, came out with a gun and said, "The first son of a bitch who touches this is going to get shot." And I understand that he's had threats since then, but he protected those 2 stores. There were villains, but there were a lot of heroes.
Who are some of the heroes?
Well, as I said, that young man and the police in the 24th, hampered as they were, did a good job. They really, you know, at 3 o'clock when we heard the first really smashing glass in the store underneath our window was being looted, we called 911. And during that period of time, they must have had thousands of calls, but within 5 minutes, between 5 and 10 minutes, there were 3 squad cars there, and they really saved that man's business.
About your business, can you describe what you felt when you got a call from that employee?
Gratitude.
What did you say to the people who stood in front of your store?
Thank you. That's all.
Why did they do that? Do you know? Why you? Why your store?
I've been here since 1932. I've seen this neighborhood come and go and come back again. From a middle-class Jewish, Irish, Italian neighborhood to a predominantly rooming house neighborhood and back to a middle-class integrated neighborhood. It's as good now as it ever was. And I have never had a bad relationship with any person that, I've had a drunk in the store who's bothered me, and a guy who said, I'll set fire to your place, you know, or something like that when I've put him out. But with the people in the area, I've given them credit, I've cashed their checks, I've helped them in their time of need, I've gotten lawyers for them, I've gone bail for them. I've done all the things that a community-minded person who cares for his fellow men has to do. But whether that's responsible for my not getting hit, I can't say. Whether it was just dumb luck that they weren't after food stores and that I was here.
They were after food stores in some areas.
But not around here much.
Now, what are you going to do now? What do you think of the area of New York in the future?
I was frightened silly, and I said to Bell when we talked about it that day, I said, I think this is the finish for New York. This is the final blow. But I've talked to 100 people since then, and it's not the finish. New York is here. It will live through this. It will grow out of this. It will pass us by. It grew out of the riots. It learned from them. It will learn from this, too. It's a hell of a town, and there are great people in it, and you have to love them. The looters, the arsonists, the sickness that's in the air in some sections, you have to take into consideration of what's happening to them, what has happened to them, the feeling that there is no place to go, there is nowhere to climb. It's a one-on-one thing. I don't think that associations of social workers really help. I don't think that the people who grab what they can in the city and run out to the suburbs to live at night really help. But we're New Yorkers, and we help. And that's all I can tell you.
If New York is going to endure, it must rely heavily on its police and fire services. Both responded quickly to their jobs on the 13th and 14th. But the demand was enormous. During the 25 hours of the blackout, there were 15,000 calls to number 911, 10 times the normal amount. There were 2,724 fire alarms, over 1,000 fires, and 55 firemen were injured. In this city of budget cuts and fiscal crisis, can our police and fire services handle a disaster of this magnitude? Should they have called on the National Guard? To discuss this question with Jeff Kamen and me, Mario Marola, mayoral candidate, Mario Cuomo, Chief of the City Fire Bureau, Joseph Flynn, mayoral candidate, Joel Harnett, and Police Commissioner Michael Codd.
Commissioner Codd, you and I have known each other for a great number of years now. I just want to ask you one question to start this. Your own street cops told me that so long as the looters, the rioters, were confined to their own neighborhoods, they felt that they could hold back, hold their fire, and try to contain the situation and watch out for human life primarily. What if those looters had banded together and marched south, out of the ghetto, in Manhattan, for instance, into the Fifth Avenue downtown shopping district? Would your philosophy and policy have changed?
I don't think so. And I don't know that we can try to answer now a pure hypothetical question. The fact of the matter is, the looters were arrested and stopped where they were. There wasn't any, if you will, march out of their residential area.
Were you prepared for one if it happened?
Yes, I think we were.
What would you have done?
We would have used the necessary force to prevent any spread of the disorder.
Including deadly force if necessary?
If necessary.
Would you have had...
Now, when I say if necessary, you've got to remember that there are both legal and moral restraints on the random and reckless use of force, and we don't condone that under any circumstances.
Commissioner, would you have had that force available? It's reported that 10,000 men who were called back into New York for duty did not show up.
There's no
would
truth.
You have had
there is
enough?
no truth to that. We have some 21,000 police officers and detectives, if we want to deal with the basic rank that does the bulk of the work. Of that number, 2,500 were on vacation. There were 1,500 on sick reports. So we immediately discount that 21,000 by 4,000. We're talking then of a number just over 17,000. Of that number, we have documented almost 15,500 who did in fact report. There are additional numbers and reports that we've gotten. We are not using them at the present time because we know there are some duplications because of the shifting that we did of manpower. So that we know that there are less than 1,500 that we haven't accounted for.
How many men were actually on duty the night of the blackout? How many men did you use? Not how many men reported in and waited for maybe another order from you, but how many men were actually used?
We used during the period from 9:34 and 9:35 until 8 o'clock the following morning better than 11,000 police officers and detectives and an additional 2,000 supervisors. So there were 13,000 members of the department, either supervisors or police officers and detectives on the street or at their assigned duties.
Where did the report of 10,000 men not coming in ever come from?
I don't know. It came from the media. It didn't come from the department. People forget that there are always people on vacation, that there are always people sick. They seem to act on the assumption that all members should at all times be present, and you don't run a department in that fashion. You've got to be prepared to take care of that next period of time. So you do have to adequately rest your people.
Commissioner Codd, one quick question for you now. What is the manner of life in terms of a riot situation? Who controls police policy, you or Mayor Bean?
I do.
Plain and simple.
Absolutely.
Chief Flynn, I am told by battalion chiefs in the street and members of the Uniformed Fire Officers Association that the fire department of the city of New York was so pressed the night of the blackout that had you had a major fire in any area where there was not looting, that chunks of the city could have burned right to the ground. How say you?
We always maintained adequate presence in all of the boroughs, particularly in the boroughs that were not affected by the rioting and by the looting and by the vandalism. For example, in Staten Island, although we relocated companies into Brooklyn, where the heavy fire situation was, we still never went below 13 engines, and I believe it was 9 ladders on Staten Island, which would have been sufficient to handle a serious fire. The same thing pertained in Queens.
You were ready for anything?
we felt that we had adequate resources on hand to handle a major fire in any of the other boroughs. As a matter of fact, there was a very fluid situation for the whole night. For example, where we had taken companies from Staten Island into Brooklyn and Queens into Brooklyn, when the situation started to stabilize there, we then sent companies from Brooklyn into the Bronx, where the situation was still bad. And what we maintained on a half-hourly check with all the boroughs, and I had a borough commander in each one of the communication centers, was a status report of all of our engine companies and ladder companies that we had available. And at no time did we get into a situation that was in extremis in the event that we had had a serious fire in Queens or in Staten Island or in Lower Manhattan.
Mr. Cuomo, you've spoken out several times on cutbacks affecting police, especially the police department. I think you have something to say now, don't you?
Yeah, I must tell you that both these descriptions, and I know both these gentlemen have enormous respect for them, but neither description jives with what I understand to be the realities from having talked to policemen and firemen. For example, as head of the Division of Fire Prevention and Control statewide, we did ask the fire department if it wanted to implement the fire mobilization plan, and it said no, there was no need for it. And yet I went to College Point and discovered a school had burned down in College Point because the only engine in College Point had left for the Bronx, and the people in the neighborhood tell me that it was an hour and a half before an engine got there. I talked to property owners and store owners in the Bronx who said they stood protecting their own property with a baseball bat while two policemen said that they couldn't intervene with the looters because there were too many of them. So to suggest that you successfully contained the looting where it was and apprehended the looters, it seems to me, frankly, Commissioner, unrealistic. Sure, there were over 4,000 arrests, but I've spoken to all kinds of people who watched their stores being looted. They got wiped out. Much of the looting was done the next day. It seems to me that while the policemen who were available did a superb job, and I have enormous respect for them, there was a need for help. There was a need for backup. I was disappointed that the Guard, not on the front line, but that the Guard wasn't brought in as backup, that the troopers weren't there as backup. To sit in houses in Queens where there was low crime and no trouble and free up your troops to get to the front line of difficulty, because my information is that the looting wasn't stopped. And that's what the people are outraged at.
Excuse me, Mr. Cuomo. Mr. Harnett, Mr. Cuomo has mentioned that they needed backup, that there were too many looters. Are you a supporter of a stronger auxiliary police force?
Yes, I am. I think if we had had a much larger auxiliary police force, it would have been highly beneficial in this situation. They could have performed the backup services that Mario was talking about. They could have been in the low crime areas. They could have been directing traffic around the city. It's obvious that we didn't have a sufficient number of police to contain the situation. In my view, they should have called the National Guard to the situation.
Let me say something on that. We do have an ample auxiliary police, very trained, very dedicated auxiliary police, and they did report and they did do great work. And as far as using them at that time for the regulation and direction of traffic, that was of absolutely no priority. That would be wasting manpower. The auxiliary police did patrol.
Oh, I don't agree with that, because you have to have an orderly city. You had a city that was blacked out. You had to have people all over that city directing traffic, and thank God there were so many citizens willing to do it, and a police force all over that city to protect the rest of the city.
What is your feeling about, excuse me, Jim?
Sorry. District Attorney of the Bronx, Mario Marola, how pressed was the criminal justice system? Did it fall apart under the strain of almost 4,000 arrests?
Well, obviously the criminal justice system functioned. It's still working. We had a system that was geared to handle in Bronx County something like 100 arrests a day, and all of a sudden we were faced with 1,000 arrests. And it should be pointed out that we didn't have power for 24 hours, and we're dependent upon electrical power in order to get our prints from Albany. Yes, there were a lot of strains, a lot of buckles on the criminal justice system, but the system was not geared for that amount of arrests. I think that we've worked very well.
Gentlemen, I'm sorry, that's all we have time for. Thank you very much for being with us. Later in this report, we'll examine the legal questions. And now the criminal justice system responded to New York's Night of Darkness.
It was a test of public morality, and it's been flunked rather spectacularly. The people who looted and robbed and set fires, of course, flunked it. But I think that the white people who've been so critical have flunked it in a certain sense, too. I find I'm troubled by people who are righteous overmuch, the people who repress their racism, repress their hatred, and it's as if this blackout with its looting had given people a license to hate. I'm so tired of hearing the righteous sputtering. I'm sorry about the poor little shopkeepers. I despise the looters. On the other hand, you cannot keep people in a condition of servitude for what? 12 generations and expect that they're going to behave with grace under pressure. They're not. They're going to steal. Their whole philosophy is snatch, grab, and run.
One of the most tiresome, back-breaking household chores is mopping and waxing floors, and the constant bending, stooping, and straining to wring out your mop. Well, here is the greatest work saver to come along in years. It's the fabulous Roll-O-Matic Mop and Waxer with this built-in remote control wringer and a sponge rubber head that always stays soft and absorbent. Watch how it quickly soaks up water. And for wringing, just flip the lever. The rollers do all the work. No more bending or stooping, and your hands never touch the water. And the Roll-O-Matic mop won't drip, so it's perfect for washing walls, ceilings, and windows. The absorbent sponge rubber head easily picks up the messiest spills, spreads liquid wax evenly and thinly without streaking. So get the Roll-O-Matic today. It's the easiest, most convenient mop and waxer you've ever used. If you don't agree, simply return it to manufacturer for full refund.
The Roll-O-Matic Mop and Waxer, an ideal gift, only $8.95 at Woolworth and Wilco, Corvettes and Sears. Complete satisfaction or return to place of purchase or manufacturer.
I'm no chick. I'm a woman. I got myself a Ford Mustang because I was tired of being treated like some bird in a gilded cage. I like my Mustang because it gives me the feeling I can be everything a woman can be. My Mustang gives me the feeling of breaking out of this cage. I like it. You'll like it.
You'll like it. You'll like it.
You'll like your Ford dealer's year-end clearance prices, too.
Here you go. Continue celebrating the bicentennial by going back where you came from. To Scotland, Ireland, or merry old England. Or wherever you want to go. You call the shot.
Make mine Hawaii.
And you'll save lots of coin if you call Callan Tours. Ha-ha! At 836-6433. Callan Tours will send you.
Whenever anyone asks for the explanation of a crime, you have to discuss it on two planes. The first is the one that seems to be accepted now, namely that environmental pressure, racism, poverty, bad slum conditions are responsible for this. In other words, it is expressed on the theory that society prepares the crime and the criminal only executes it. But I think this is a very inadequate explanation for the looting that took place. So we go to the second plane. A society must have a kind of value which is beyond self-interest. The moment that we think only of ourselves, of immediate gratification, then crime is the shortcut to that gratification. And today we are relaxed in all of our moral values, not merely in the depressed areas, but in the middle class areas and the rich areas from which a great deal of crime comes. Lack of respect for teachers, for parents, for authority, for law, for the government. Unfortunately, that general condition, when it breaks out in a special crisis, causes what it does. Balzac said that every criminal is an atheist, even if he doesn't know it. And unless we meet the test of character, which is how you would conduct yourself if you were guaranteed not to be caught, unless you meet that test of character, you're going to have crime in some form or other, irrespective of the immediate incendiary situation. So I think that unless we develop an overall general climate of more moral value, you will not have a cessation of these situations. Mr. Bosch?
Mr. Nizer, thank you. Earlier, we showed you scenes of the looting Wednesday night and during the day on Thursday. 3,776 people arrested. Thousands more fled the gutted stores before police arrived. They paraded before television cameras with their loot. They laughed, joked, and danced in the streets. It was a holiday of lawlessness. Did they think about what they were doing? Did they feel any pangs of guilt? Jeff Kamen talked with several of the looters and some of their neighbors who said, that they just held back.
Police came with 4 cars, right? They ran up on the sidewalk. They blocked the doorways off, right? I jump over one car, right? They tell me to halt. I tell them, yo, you know? I said, everybody else is still and why can't I still, you know?
They should have just took what they wanted. That's all. They had to burn the place down. Now we got nowhere to shop. Nowhere to shop. You got to go all the way to Pathmark, and that's the where.
Why was it that everyone was looting? Could somebody give me an insight into that?
They didn't want to give nobody no jobs. You know, the government said the city said they don't have no money, but they got money. So now, but nobody working. So this is 77. Everybody know that times is hard now. People, they want things. They want luxury, you know, furniture, clothing, so nothing, food. So this is the first opportunity they got to get it. So they're going to take it. You know, if I was out there myself, I would have got what I wanted too.
You were not among the looters?
No, I wasn't. Unfortunate.
How do you feel about it?
I feel it was bad. It was bad. It shouldn't be done. It was bad. I do not feel that it was bad. Everybody, if you want to loot, you're going to loot. That's right. Where you going to go shopping now?
Would you answer the question? Did you loot?
No.
You didn't?
I did not.
Where were you at the time?
I loot, though. My brother did it. My brother did it.
You see?
You did not loot if it was your own business. Because you know why? Because people loot. Man, to loot, to be looting, to get something for their own self. That's the way it works. That's the way it always going to be.
All right, now look, there's a word that I grew up with that I think everybody grew up with, which is called morality, which is knowing the difference between right and wrong. Now, what do you think about the morality of looting?
I really don't know. Well, see, my opinion is that, you know, the people around here, they poor, and they saw it, you know, and the cops, they didn't tell them, you know, when they first came through, they said, hey, you know, go ahead, you know, do it, you know.
You heard police officers say, go ahead and do it?
Right. They came through, you know, several times. They wasn't stopping the people, you know, because they was around here, right? It was too dark.
The cops came, and they parked the cars there, and they scared everybody out, and they cut out, because they were scared, too.
Streets by harried police officers. The days following the blackout became a trial by heat. The city's criminal justice system was swamped, jails were overcrowded, the Tombs was temporarily reopened. There weren't enough soap, toilet facilities, food, or in some cases, adequate space to lie down. There are chances, or rather charges, the city ignored the constitutional rights of the thousands of people it arrested in those hours. Howard Tuckner and I will discuss these problems with attorney Louis Neiser, Michael Russett of the Association of Legal Aid, Criminal Court Judge Erwin Brownstein, Commissioner of Corrections Benjamin Malcolm, Peter Tufo, Chairman of the New York City Board of Corrections, and mayoral candidate Ed Koch. Howard, if you'll begin the questioning.
Congressman Koch, in light of what happened, do you think that Mayor Beam acted correctly as far as the courts were concerned? Should the National Guard have been called in? We were disgraced by professional burglars and perhaps amateur looters, but did we disgrace ourselves more by the handling of the criminal justice system?
The answer is yes. We disgraced ourselves. The mayor did a lousy job. There should have been a curfew in the riot areas. The National Guard, in my judgment, should have been alerted and brought in, not to the riot areas, but into the non-riot areas, so as to release the cops who were then doing police duty in the non-riot areas, as well as traffic duty in the rest of the city. With respect to the criminal justice system, I think we're going to see a kind of a cover-up operation, and I'll tell you what I mean by that. I've watched the television in the last couple of days, and I've watched the judges, and they've said, it wasn't us, it was the DA, it was the police, and I've watched the police. And they say it wasn't us, it was the judges. And I watched Mario Marola, who said on one occasion that only 3 judges who were not on duty came into the Bronx as volunteers to assist those judges who were on duty to process those who were going to be arraigned. What I'm hoping is that if there is to be an investigation, and I know that Peter Tufo just told me that there is to be one, that it will cover all of those things, and instead of the mayor calling for an investigation of Con Ed, which is done by the state and the federal government, he ought to be calling for an investigation of why the city didn't have a plan to deal with all of the problems that came out of that rioting and that looting.
Now, Judge Brownstein, you are a judge. He's talking about judges. How would you respond to that?
I think that Congressman Koch is possibly not familiar with what went on.
Tell me.
At 7:30 in the morning on Thursday, my administrative judge, Judge Rubin, and I went to the criminal court. I went down into the pit where the prisoners from the night before were being detained. He and I spoke with the correction department, and about an hour after we had been there were more judges in the building than we needed for 3 times the amount of the looters that had been arrested. We were in a position to begin working, and did begin working. By 9:30, the court was open, and the business of the night before had been cleaned up, and we were ready to go. We identified where the looters had been housed. There were 100 at one precinct, 90 at another precinct. We had some at the Tombs. The correction department opened its facilities, fortunately, and were able to house them. When I went back to the Supreme Court, where I am assigned, with my administrative judge, we found 22 judges sitting outside that building, in a building that was closed, where they were not needed. Our building was closed, the Superior Court, and every one of those judges volunteered to go down to the lower court and to work, and so I must, if I'm a little upset at it, it's because I think you don't know what you're talking about.
But let me ask you this. If everything went so well, why were people kept incarcerated for that number of days?
Well, it's
if
very simple.
Every judge was doing his job. Tell me why.
Simple. Before a man can be brought to a courtroom, he's got to be booked, and he's got to be fingerprinted. And there were still people by Friday afternoon who had not been fingerprinted. We have spent millions of dollars on the New York State Intelligence and Identification System, which simply, in our terms, means getting a rap sheet, getting a prior criminal record, and we couldn't get them. And the law is very clear. A judge cannot arraign a defendant who doesn't have a criminal record. Excuse me, let me finish. In addition to that, we can't arraign a defendant where we have no police officer. And police officers were returned to the street. The emergency on Thursday was still on. The crisis was still going as far as we knew. And we were trying to find it out, I assure you. So far as we knew, we couldn't get enough police officers back into the courthouse to sign those complaints.
Well, excuse me, sir, but in the event of a crisis, shouldn't a criminal justice system take this into account? New York is the largest city. These things have been known to happen before. Shouldn't this have been taken into account? What I'm really asking you and everyone on this panel is our criminal justice system what it should be for what New York is.
Could I speak to that?
Please.
Can I just complete this statement, Peter? I'm sorry to interrupt, but there are other aspects of the system you should be aware of. We have the Pretrial Services Agency, which must interview a defendant before he gets to that court for background purposes. It's just important with that interview as a fingerprint and rap sheet is. Those kids, I met the director of the Pretrial Services Agency in the dark, holding a candle at 7:30 in the morning in that courthouse where we already had people coming in. He had his kids working 24 hours a day.
So these are things that must happen whether or not there is a blackout.
Of course, but you see, the court doesn't start the process. The arrest starts the process. The police must bring the defendant to the courthouse. The complaint must be drawn. He must be booked. And we can't touch a defendant until he gets there.
That is the question, sir.
Judge, the bottom line is, did they do the job? And the bottom line is that they did not.
Our judges did the job. That's not so.
Well, whether the judges or the cops, they
Please,
didn't
for a
do the
moment.
job.
Mr. Truffaut.
Okay.
Mr. Truffaut.
This seems to me an instant replay of Rashomon, because there are 4 elements in the criminal justice system: the police, the courts, corrections, and the prosecution and defense. Each of them saw this blackout, this crisis, from their own perspective. From what I observed during the 5 days that I was there, each of them did their individual jobs well. The police did a very good job using restraint on the streets, made 10 times as many arrests during the blackout looting as they made during the riots of 1967, 1968, 65. The correction officers acted with great humanity. They acted with great restraint, put in a lot of overtime. The judges were there. I saw them sitting. They were sitting there. The legal aid attorneys were there, working overtime, volunteering. The DAs were there. Everybody was working. The system didn't work. It failed. And that's why everyone saw it from their own perspective, but no one put it together.
Why did the system fail?
1, because there was no preparation for an emergency like this. 2, the system was set up to fail. There is a criminal justice system that spends $1.3 billion every year into these 4 elements. 80% of that is at the top of the funnel. It's devoted toward providing police services on the streets and making arrests. That 80% then funnels down into the rest of the system, into the judges, which are about 7% of the system, into the DAs and legal defense, which are about 3% of the system, and into corrections, which is about 10%. The rest of the system couldn't handle what the police brought to it.
All right, so what you're saying, and stop me if I'm wrong, is that in the future, if we have something like this, or perhaps even worse, the system will still fail unless something's done. What must be done?
First, a political decision has to be made to devote the resources to the system to back up the political decisions that are made. If the political decision is to make sweeps, be tough on looters, be tough on people suspected of looting, then you've got to have the resources to back up that political decision.
Are you talking about being tough on the street or
being tough
beyond
either
it?
on the street or in court? If the police bring in a lot of people and you have to house them in police precincts or in court pens, you've got to have the facilities to deal with them. If the judges set high bails and are going to remand a lot of people or cause a lot of people to be sent to jail, you've got to have a corrections budget that's ready for that. Nobody was ready for that, and it seems to me that it's just clear that a city like this can have an emergency at any time. It doesn't have to be a blackout. It could be a hurricane, a terrorist attack, a riot, or a blackout.
Would you agree, however, that we do have the facilities?
No, we don't have the facilities to handle this number of arrests in the jails.
I was about to ask you that.
We have the police available to make this number of arrests. We have
Why
the
not
judges
have
available.
central locations for distributing or
Well, I think
housing
that's a very good question. There have been emergency preparedness plans in the past that have recommended that schools be set up as central areas in each of the boroughs, that food and linen and bedding and that kind of thing be made available. It wasn't done this time.
Well, if we had the facilities, Mr. Tufo, would minors, would juveniles be put into the tombs and have to stay there in many cases for 3 and 4 days with adults?
Let me speak to that.
Please.
You know, in 1969, 1970, we had 15,000 prisoners in our institutions here in New York City. At the time of the blackout, we only had 6,500. Now, we have places to put them. We can't stock them into court pens. We can put them on Rikers Island. We can put them in various other places. We called an emergency after the inmates in the Bronx House of Detention rioted and tore up 3 dormitories there, and we had to go there with force in the middle of the night and use just a demonstration of force in order to evacuate 145 inmates, which made us short. Now, another 145 places. We have facilities throughout the city, and when I called the emergency, it meant I could double cell. And I called the emergency for the entire department.
I have to ask you to hurry.
May I interrupt just for a moment because Mr. Russick hasn't had a chance yet?
I would disagree with Judge Brownstein, and I would have to disagree with Mr. Tufo. I think the system could have dealt with this crisis much better than it did. I'm not saying that all those who were arrested could have been arraigned within a day or 2 days, but surely they could have been arraigned sooner than 5 or 6, as has taken place. In terms of fingerprints that Judge Brownstein mentions, there were fingerprints available, I understand, at one police plaza in New York City. As far as police officers coming in and processing cases, there's a system called pre-arraignment, which works in the Bronx, where police officers are excused from the arraignment court themselves. There's no reason that that system could not have been implemented throughout the entire city.
We did pre-arraignment.
Mr. Tufo, finally.
Let's get a comment from Mr. Nizer.
I think this is a classic conflict between precious rights. You can't argue one side is right or wrong in an emergency. If you wanted to protect the civil rights of all the arrested people, then you'd have to let them free because they were held too long. And I don't think anybody here is for that. If, on the other hand, you, in an emergency, realize the crowded conditions that you didn't expect unless you had another $1 billion to build the proper court facilities, then under those circumstances, if you favor what was done and undergo it on the same theory as if there were an epidemic,
Mr. Nizer, I'm going to have to end this section there.
you would stop civil rights.
Mr. Nizer, I'm going to have to end it there. We are out of time for this section. I want to thank you all for joining us. Well, how did the media respond to this blackout? Did they help, or did they inflame the problems? We'll examine that issue in just a moment.
And this is for the bathroom. Helen, you're smart about decorating, but not about toothpaste. Letting Bobby use that AIM? I wouldn't let my kids go near it. They're cavity prone. So is he. All the more reason to use fluoride toothpaste. Fluoride fights cavities.
AIM has fluoride. AIM fights cavities. But AIM is a gel.
AIM tastes good. I like it.
He likes it, Blanche.
Well, I don't know. I'm almost scared to switch.
Look, Blanche, Bobby's cavity prone. Would I take chances? AIM has fluoride, AIM fights cavities, and he likes it. So maybe he's brushing longer.
And I know his checkups have been good. You mean AIM really does fight cavities?
Yes, And he's cavity prone.
Good checkups? Helen, you do have great taste. We'll try AIM.
For good checkups in the cavity-prone years, take AIM against cavities.
You know, Ford's been turning out bestsellers since the first Ford. Over the last few years, Pinto's been America's best-selling small car. I like the way you don't have to think twice in buying a Pinto. The thinking's in the car itself. It's thoughtfully engineered for great mileage. It's thoughtfully designed, it's thoughtfully priced. I like the way Pinto made it to the top. By thinking of me. I like it, you'll like it.
You'll like it, you'll like it. You'll like your Ford dealer's year-end clearance prices, too.
Viva is great. I mean, this is something.
Okay, switch and let's do the Viva test again. Are your towels absorbing?
Yes.
Okay, now scrub with an abrasive cleanser. Come on, really scrub. Okay, stop. Stop. Okay, pick them up at the corners. What did you see happen again?
Same thing that happened the first time. The Bounty fell apart and the Viva didn't.
Can your towel pass the Viva test?
The blackout literally struck us like lightning. The power went off in Manhattan just 26 minutes before Steve and I were scheduled to begin our regular evening report. Instead, we found ourselves working by candlelight, trying in those first few minutes to determine just how widespread the blackout was. Because they had emergency generators, the phone company kept open our lines of communication. We were off the air, literally working in the dark. But the all-news radio stations managed either to stay on the air or get back on within seconds. It was radio's night, and they did it on their own. The sophisticated computers that drive the teletypes were silent. All of us relied on the radio reporters to keep us up to the minute on development at police headquarters, with Con Ed, and on the streets. It was the night of the transistor and car radio. Television screens throughout New York and Westchester were black. WNBC-TV managed to get back on the air at 11:02 that night. WCBS-TV only lost a few minutes. Both stations had auxiliary generators at the Empire State Building to keep their transmitters on. Both began producing news specials. Chuck Scarborough and Tony Guide on Channel 4, Jim Jensen and Dave Marish on Channel 2. It wasn't easy. Each team operated with a single light in a corner of their newsroom. But those of us affected by the blackout couldn't see or hear them. Their reports were watched on Long Island and in New Jersey. Here's part of what people who had power saw and heard.
34, the power went off completely in Manhattan and in Westchester, and this is shades of 1965. What I have here, I don't know if you can see this. We went to the library by candlelight. This is Life magazine from November 19th, 1965. 5:28 p.m., November 9th, the lights went out. That was the story. And if you turn to page 36 for me, Tony, there are, this is awfully crowded right here. But it's kind of cozy, you know? We should work together like this more often.
Yeah, where do they number the pages?
Just a second. We're going to, I think it's fascinating because this is probably a little bit of what's going on right now. There we go. Okay. All right, let's see. I don't know whether we can make a picture on this camera with this. Probably not. Let's tilt it forward a little bit. All right, there it is. There was Manhattan. It's taken by a Life magazine photographer in 1965 during the Great Power Outage. Now, you're sitting on my wire. Now, let me get over here, Tony. This is terrific. I think we're violating some union agreement here about prop men, but these are photos taken before and after photos in 1965. We're in just a little bit. Manhattan before the lights went out, Manhattan after the lights went out.
We had a report of a robbery and a shooting up in Harlem, but that would have happened probably lights out or not. You have the usual amount.
Well, there have been reports of some looting in areas of Brooklyn, 14th Street on the Upper West Side, but again, the reports are that the police have all these situations under control. Mayor Beam has gone to City Hall. He set up an emergency headquarters there. Police Commissioner Codd's been summoned down there, Acting Fire Commissioner Murphy, emergency banks of telephone.
Even for those of us who were not on the air that night, the work of journalism went on, and all of us have our stories, how we tried to cope that night. Gossip columnist Doris Lilly has hers.
The night the lights went out, I was home, sitting in front of the television set, eating a tuna fish sandwich. I'd been at a cocktail party earlier that evening, but I wanted to get home. I had to be home between 9 and 9:30 because I was expecting a call from London. A friend of mine was going to call me and tell me when Prince Charles was getting married and who he was going to marry. And then the lights went out. Now, I knew that I had a flashlight because I'd paid $14 for one about 2 weeks before, but I couldn't find it. I couldn't find 3 transistor radios that I knew I had, but I'd put in closets someplace. And I couldn't even find candles. So I went around the apartment with a cigarette lighter like this, ran into a table, and realized that on this table were 2 candelabras with 12 candles on them. So I lit all the candles, went into my bedroom like a latter-day Lady Macbeth, went to bed and went to sleep. Got up the next morning, packed, and went out to East Hampton. Now, many, many people from New York that could get away, got away. And they went out to East Hampton and just to get away from it all, because everyone was afraid that the lights would go out again. And I saw Larry Lockman, he's chairman of the board at Bloomingdale's. I saw the Paul Mannheims. I saw Lee Eastman. He's the father of Linda Eastman, who's married to Paul McCartney. And it was a lovely, cool, delicious time, but I never got my phone call from London, and I still don't know who Prince Charles is going to marry.
The city's 3 major newspapers were faced with a mammoth problem. To get back in production, we have only to fire up a transmitter, turn on the cameras and microphones, and begin broadcasting. The Times and Daily News had to cope with an enormous logistics problem. The Times managed to get a 40-page edition out Thursday with the help of The Record in Hackensack, and the News put out a 32-page Blackout edition with help from Newsday. The New York Post was unable to publish it at all on Thursday, but when he did get his paper back on the street Friday, publisher Robert Murdoch ordered a headline that screamed 24 hours a night of terror. Deputy Mayor for Economic Development, Osborne Elliott, criticized the Post headline as sensationalism. But Murdoch sees it differently. With a publishing empire in New York alone that includes the Post, New York Magazine, Village Voice, Murdoch is worried about what the blackout portends for our future.
Well, it raises tremendous questions. The obvious questions of how to handle civil disorders, how to handle mass looting without creating mob riots. But there seem to me to be much bigger questions we have to address ourselves to now, and not just in New York, but in America. We have, in the great cities, great pools, armies of unemployed, underprivileged, probably undereducated, but basically unskilled people. The vast majority of those people are law-abiding and good citizens, even if they're unfortunate and underprivileged. This was the criminal element amongst them. They weren't even hungry. The number of food stores that were looted were very minor. These people were going in to make money, to steal valuable TV sets, furniture, and the like, with the simple idea of stealing things to resell and to make money. It was a criminal action, and they should be treated the same as any other criminal action.
How do you think Mayor Beam handled it?
I thought that Mayor Beam himself failed to give leadership and spent his day very largely with his press agent devising press conferences denouncing Con Ed, which he had all of the rest of the year to do, when people were frankly terrified that the city was burning down around them. I personally, and all the people I spoke to, felt very critical of the way the mayor was publicly handling it. Now, I know that people on his staff, like Deputy Mayor Comerfeld, was in touch with the governor, were acting very responsibly. I think the role of the police under Commissioner Codd will be debated for a long time, particularly amongst the police themselves. The rank and file, I'm sure, would have preferred to be much tougher. The policy, though, coming from Commissioner Codd and maybe even from Commissioner Murphy before then, was to be very careful not to trigger a major race riot which they could not have controlled.
There did exist a possibility for a while that they might call in the National Guard, and I think there were even rumors that they were thinking of bringing in the Army from Fort Dix. What would have happened if they had?
Well, I think the National Guard was pretty much out in that half of the National Guard are in the police or the fire brigade anyway.
Yeah, that's true.
And there aren't all that many. Would there be enough National Guardsmen if it's triggered a riot? At the time you had 10,000 people, say, looting stores, and 200,000 watching them. The theory was that if anyone started shooting, you'd unite those two. You'd have 210,000 people on your hands rioting. The National Guard couldn't have handled a riot of that size. Now, the alternative really, all along, was if it got too far out of hand, they would have had to bring in the Army.
Do you see the aftermath of the blackout, and obviously crises that have hit the city before the blackout, but do you see this sort of thing pushing more and more people out of New York City and affecting a number of people who might have considered coming into New York?
Yes. I think there's no doubt about it. I think that the looting and the arson that took place have gone a long way to destroying, finally, more neighborhoods, which are going to be almost impossible to rebuild. I think our image was made by the television news services on Thursday night across the country, across the world. And it was an image of looting and burning. And that made a very strong impression throughout the world, and certainly throughout this country. And it's going to take time for that to be forgotten and to be replaced by the image of a city with a purpose and with excitement and as a worthwhile and great center for this country.
Do you think that was the wrong impression that the TV industry gave?
No, I think it simply reported very accurately and graphically what was going on.
Another value-packed Sears Red Tag sale is here. Tomorrow only, save from 10 to 40% on many items. Sears quality at low Red Tag prices. Tomorrow only at Sears.
Be ready. Here comes football. Sports Illustrated is bringing it your way, starting with our two big football issues. Who'll be number one among the colleges? You can check our top 20 teams and see if they match your 20. Then we'll hit you right on the numbers with scouting reports on the colleges and the pros. We'll tell you who's hitting and who's hurting. Because football isn't just X's and O's. It's the people that play the game. The heads, arms, hands, legs, and heart of football. All through the season, we'll tell you who's calling the plays and who's running them. Why some work and some don't. The nation's best sports writers and photographers will bring you the Lions and the Tigers, the Eagles and the Rams, the Birds and the Bears. You'll get football by the inches, feet, and yards. You'll get the touchdowns and the letdowns. And we'll bring it to you Sports Illustrated style.
County hit by last night's blackout. Here's where the power was still out at last word. In Manhattan, about 500,000 people below 14th Street are affected. About the same number of customers in the East 60s, 70s, and 80s still don't have any power. In the West Bronx, about 68,000 customers are affected. In Queens, another 180,000 customers without power. In addition, there are outages in Bergen County, New Jersey, reportedly having nothing to do with the power blackout here in New York. It all started at 9:34 last night, when New York went dark for the second time in 12 years. Here at Channel 11, we were getting ready to go on the air. Instead, we got a new top story we couldn't air. The blackness that blanketed the metropolitan area covered some 10 million New Yorkers. To some, it was a jungle where looters, muggers, and snipers took to the streets in huge numbers, smashing windows, stealing, and injuring. Tonight, an armed man robbing a drugstore on Amsterdam Avenue on the west side of Manhattan was shot dead by police. He is the only criminal casualty in all of this so far. However, nearly 3,000 people have been arrested and 78 police officers have been hurt. The state police have been brought in, but Governor Carey says he will not put the National Guard on alert. Arson has been a big problem, especially in the slum areas of the Bronx and Brooklyn. We'll have reports not only on the tragedies of the blackout, but on the many triumphs coming up. But first, Pat reports on how it all started.
This is where it all happened. This is where the blackout that put Manhattan and 5 of its boroughs and part of Westchester in total darkness. This is Indian Point in Westchester on the upper Hudson River. Reportedly what happened was in the midst of a severe summer storm. Lightning came in a series of severe flashes and struck a line leading into Indian Point generator number 3. Not the generator itself, but the line. This is reportedly what happened. In a desperate attempt to keep the city, the boroughs, from a complete blackout, Con Ed started to decrease its power from 5% to 8%, had to give up and eventually shut all of its power off entirely. This occurred last night at 9:34. We tried to get into Indian Point earlier this morning to see if there was somebody at Con Ed that we could talk to find out what actually happened. There are people in the area that say it was not lightning. But Con Ed has blocked off its entranceway. No members of the press are being permitted in. You'd expect to see some sign of damage, something that would account for Practically 12 hours or more in some areas of total blackout in Manhattan and its boroughs. You see nothing. This is simply a fault in one line which has affected so much of the city and the outlying areas. The line is somewhere on a hill above Indian Point plant. It's got the highest vantage point, so it's impossible for us to show you exactly where it is. It is up above the plant. The problem with turning back on the power to New York seems to be that it's a manual job which requires hundreds and hundreds of men to go to circuit breakers throughout different areas, manually resetting them. Some of the people in the local area were not convinced that this was all started by lightning. They referred to an eerie light that they had seen above the Indian Point plant. Many people thought it was definitely something else. I talked with two of those men. Ray, you mentioned to me that a friend of yours or someone who worked at the plant said that this was not caused by lightning.
Well, that's what I understand. I was told that it was some kind of a cut-in from across the river, that the overload was too much, I understand. That really caused it.
Was the lightning here as severe as reported by Con Ed?
The lightning was really terrific. The storm was really rough, yeah.
Did you notice any other unusual light effects in the sky other than the lightning? Was there something that you saw that was unusual, different?
Well, I don't know whether I should tell you, I'm not old, but I remember Tom's River when I was a little kid, and I was in Yonkers, and I could see that in the sky, but it had nothing to compare with this. This was around 9 o'clock, I believe it was. Oh, gee, everything just lit up as bright as can be.
So you personally would think it would be lightning?
No, I know it was something else. It was a different glow. It was the whole place was like daylight, or even a blue light, for instance, not exactly daylight. And that went off, and then it came back again in a few minutes, the second time.
After all the lightning had stopped, I saw some bright lights in the sky up north. I live in Tarrytown, and the lights were much brighter than normal lightning. And I knew it wasn't lightning. I thought possibly something happened up here. But the lights were already off at this point.
What kind of brightness was it? Was there a color that you can remember that was...
It was more orange than anything. It was more of an orange color than lightning color, and there were no veins of light through it.
The light that both men were referring to was clarified to me later when Con Ed did give us permission. As a matter of fact, we were the only news crew that was given permission to go into the Indian Point facility. The light that the men were referring to was reportedly the explosion of the transformer leading into generator number 3. At 10:45, another explosion was reported in another transformer at a substation, but I haven't talked to Con Ed since then, so that is definitely just a report. We were not permitted to film the transformer nor the damaged line. We did get a broad view for you, which you just saw, which were the 3 units, the 3 nuclear units, number 1, 2, and 3, and the tie line, which up until now I've always referred to as an electric tower, but I learned a lot today, some of which I'll be discussing a little bit later with Roger Field. There's one addition to this, which I will read to you. The FCC, the Federal Power Commission, says the tie lines from the other companies to Con Ed were not strong enough to help support New York, so they had to be cut off. The Federal Power Commission wants to know why these lines weren't strong enough, and they're planning an investigation into this. Steve?
Okay, Pat. In many ways, the darkness magnified the normal character of New Yorkers. But for the mayor of this city, the blackout that was never to happen again left him outraged. The mayor spent the night, as many of us did, at work, and when he faced the television cameras for the first time early this morning, he attacked Con Ed as if the utility were a political opponent, saying Con Ed was guilty of gross negligence and promised an investigation.
We cannot tolerate, in this age of modern technology, a power system that can shut down the nation's largest city with a bolt of lightning in Rockland County. We deserve answers and remedies quickly. The Public Service Commission is already investigating this matter.
The mayor has also appointed a board of inquiry with subpoena power to investigate all aspects.
We're moving in Brooklyn. To appoint a board of inquiry and then to say that, however, before the board of inquiry sits, I declare the company guilty of gross negligence is a little like saying we'll have a fair trial before we hang the defendant. I don't think we were guilty of gross negligence at all. I think that the protective equipment we had on our system is good, it's modern, it's comparable to what other utilities have. Our machines were protected last night. In the first blackout, our machines didn't have the protection to keep them lubricated as they rolled down. we had that last night, and as a result, we had no major or consequential machine damage. So I just think respectfully, I think he's wrong about that.
Then late last night, Mayor Beam had talked with Luce about this power failure.
I spoke to Charles Luce, chairman of Con Edison, and I advised him to be prepared to explain to me and to the people of this city how a blackout of such proportions could occur after we'd been assured by Con Ed that the blackout experienced in 1965 couldn't happen again.
Nobody can say that under no circumstances will there be power failures, because power is generated with machines operated by human beings, and there simply is no way.
So there's no way we can have a foolproof system?
There's no way, and there's no country or no utility in the United States or abroad that has an absolutely foolproof system. There's no such thing.
Then Luce said the Con Ed company will appoint a board of inquiry of its own, and said last night's situation was compounded because Con Ed had imported or was buying about 1/3 of its power from another utility. The reason was money. It's cheaper at times for Con Ed to buy power rather than generate the power itself. Luce said the company owed it to its investors. Then Mayor Beam, citing the millions of frazzled New Yorkers who suffered through the muggy 20-hour ordeal without electricity, said of Con Ed, "Sometimes I think we ought to condemn them to hang." Beam snapped when asked if he might not be given the giant utility a fair shake. Patty?
Coming up, we'll have film reports on the looting and arson that ravaged parts of the city during the blackout.
And we'll show you how the hospitals coped during the emergency and turned to outdated practices to save lives. And some important information on how the blackout may have made some of your food dangerous to eat.
Is going to be used for
is even
basic difference.
into the lead in the Bronx. Treasure Avenue at King.
Luggage.
Once in some areas that countless stores were stripped bare before police arrived. Harlem, the Bronx Fordham section, Bedford-Stuyvesant in Brooklyn, and Jamaica Queens were among the hardest hit. From midnight till shortly before dawn, along many main shopping streets, the cops were so outnumbered they often settled for retrieving bits of stolen merchandise dropped by the crooks on the run. Even inside the stores, while police sought to secure any goods which remained, looters popped up from behind counters and raced back out to the blackness. Windows were smashed, metal gates ripped away, and the streets filled with silhouettes carrying away whatever they'd grabbed. City officials already say the losses from damage and theft are astronomical, easily in the hundreds of millions of dollars. For the most part, the looters simply ran when the police arrived, but in Spanish Harlem at about 2 a.m., the roving looters began heaving rocks and bottles at the cops, and it took a fusillade of warning shots to disperse them.
Yeah, you can. Out of the way now.
Where you from? The New?
Yeah. Yeah.
Watch your heads over here, man.
They shooting
all
at you?
kinds of shit and everything.
Shoot him, shoot him!
The fire department hasn't even counted the exact number of blazes throughout the city, but there have been at least 600, many of them deliberately set. The fires created added confusion, which worked to the looters' advantage. At the intersection of Broadway and Hancock Street in Brooklyn, the day's first light revealed a wide-open distribution depot of stolen goods and a street scene that looked like a Calcutta market. Hundreds of bundles of every size being casually taken away by a mass of people with no one paying for anything. The wide-open stealing continued throughout the day, though the intensity diminished after early morning. The streets of Spanish Harlem were covered with debris and damaged merchandise scattered by the looters. Many merchants managed to save some of their goods by standing overnight vigil at their shops with shotguns and pistols. But most arrived too late to salvage much. For hundreds of shopkeepers, the blackout of 1977 has meant financial disaster.
I think 20 guys must have taken this gate. And a little at a time, from what the neighbors in the neighborhood told me, every time there were no police cars in the area, they pulled a little more. When the police cars came, they ran away. And it took about 3-4 hours to finally get the gate open. And fortunately, they caught 4 guys. I don't know what the outcome will be.
More than 2,000 people were arrested overnight and at least another 600 during today. The charges against most are burglary and grand larceny, but according to veteran officers we spoke with, felony convictions are going to be very difficult because of the chaotic circumstances surrounding the arrests. That and the huge drain on the courts will likely result in the acceptance of guilty pleas to minor offenses. Early this evening, Governor Carey turned down Mayor Beam's request that the National Guard be put on alert. Carey says he believes at this time the city police have control of the situation. But 250 state troopers were brought into the city at 8 this evening. They'll be directing traffic to free up city cops for patrol duties. Correction officers at the Bronx House of Detention had their hands full shortly after midnight when, as John Rowland reports, the inmates tried to use the blackout to break out.
No one did escape, but they came close. Corrections Commissioner Benjamin Malcolm told me that he had asked for backup emergency power for this facility, but so far it has not been installed. He hopes now it will be. We arrived shortly after the riot was put down, and the men were waiting to hear from Malcolm.
In the morning, Commissioner Benjamin Malcolm came out to speak to these men.
I've been in this department 6.5 years, and I've never seen a more professional job than you've done tonight. You held your cool, you moved it out, you kept the damage down, and you did an excellent job. And I'm just very happy to be a part of you. Thank you.
Commissioner, could we see your second, sir? What is it that these men had to do? What was the problem?
We had to move tonight 158 very hostile inmates who had torn up 2 dormitories, who have breached the wall, who had ropes going out of the window, who had set fires.
This is the type of damage. We are now inside the Bronx House of Detention. We're in the north wing. This is a dormitory area. You can see for yourself the type of destruction that Commissioner Malcolm was talking about. Now, I'm going to take you over this way to a screen, and you're going to see the type of real concern that there was here for an escape. Because you come right over here, you can see a good-sized hole somehow ripped through this wiring here, and this is really tough stuff. What was used to go through, I don't know. And there are windows broken out on the far side out there, and it's conceivable that with a little more time, getting through here would have been easy. Getting through those windows would have been a little bit more difficult, but perhaps given enough time, that too could have happened, and we could have had a lot of people from this institution out on the street. Right across from the damage that you just saw, now we're on the other side, the south side of the dormitory area. And as you can see, men actually set fire to things here. We're now on the 3rd floor of this institution, and I'm not sure if you can believe what you're seeing. I'm not sure that I can. Incredible destruction, pipes broken off at the floor, and behind me, an entire wall knocked down. An entire wall knocked down here. Water all over the place, the smell of fire that was in this place. Again, absolutely incredible destruction.
At this hour, the Bronx House of Detention has been cleaned up enough and repaired to the point where the men who tore it apart will return. The thousands of people who looted during the blackout were taken to the tombs. It had to be reopened. The already overcrowded jails in the city just didn't have the room to take all the people who looted and burned during the power failure.
A lot of people were shocked and said so about the rape of the city by mobs during the dark hours, and Doris McMillan went out to find out what made people run wild.
The question took us to Spanish Harlem, where the streets were paved with the remnants of what used to be store windows and security gates. Why the plunder? Well, according to one New York psychologist, the hot weather was a factor. So was the dark. Dr. Leonard Krinsky says that when the lights are out, people feel freer to do anything they want. But most importantly, he says, it's the economics. There's been high unemployment in the Hispanic community. The people who live in the neighborhood echo the psychologist's sentiments.
This community has not been destroyed by the people. It's been destroyed by the exploitation of businesses in this community, towards this community, by the lack of funds for jobs, by the lack of funds for housing, by the rates that Con Ed is in charges. You know, when a family has to pay $200 to $300 for a lousy apartment with rats and roaches, and they have to pay a Con Ed bill of $50, $60, $70 a month, they're the ones that have to blame.
Sometimes they want to buy something and they can't afford it and they have to steal it. We all feel that way. Some of us do. A lot of us do, but it's not right, though.
Some of the merchants whose businesses were destroyed took a different view. They spent the day closing their stores, which had little left to steal, and they were bitter.
We've been here 75 years. We're a respected member of this community, and this is what was done to us.
Hello.
What are you going to do now?
Nothing. What can we do anymore? We're lost. We're finished. We're wiped out. And these people are going to be lost because of that.
They seem to be waiting for stuff like this. They seem to thrive on this kind of business. See, they hang around. They just hang around and wait for something to happen. so they can get in. See? And I'm not the only one. They took next doors, and they took the one store on the corner, took a few other stores up the street.
What does this do to the community?
It ruins it. They're going to make a ghost town out of the city of New York.
Many of the stores in this neighborhood may not open again. The store owners say it's a shame since they've spent so many years in this neighborhood. As for the residents, well, they got what they wanted during the late night hours, but said one man, did they stop to think about tomorrow? On 107th and 3rd Avenue, this is Doris McMillan.
And if you're wondering why your phone worked while your lights didn't, it's because Ma Bell has backup power. It went on when Con Ed went out. Ma Bell says it handled something like 80 million calls during the blackout, twice as many as would be the normal amount. Instead of the average 17,000 calls in a 24-hour period to 911, it was dialed 45,000.
Kurt's furniture store was just about cleaned out when the owner arrived this morning. Behind what was left of his protective gate, he lashed out at the mayor, the governor, and the looters.
It's a carnival, and the mayor thinks it's a carnival, and Carrie thinks it's a carnival.
What kind of things did they take out?
Everything. Heavy stuff. Nobody. They took everything. They took them with cars. They took them with cars. Refrigerators, washing machines, gas ranges, okay?
Police did make several arrests in the area. This man was taken into custody for threatening a store manager who refused to let a gang of kids in to take what they wanted. But for the most part, police just chased the looters away, then stood guard over what was left. In more than a dozen stores along Broadway, there wasn't very much left. Looters, well aware that the police were not pursuing them, walked leisurely home with their loot, seeming not to care whether they were filmed or not. Some of the vandals were under 10 years old. Others were older and apparently were out to do more than just rip down gates and take what they wanted. Fires were set in stores after they had been looted. Like the police, firemen were spread too thin to keep up. In one block along Broadway, 4 stores were burning. One resident said the National Guard should be called in. Looters were beginning to break into private homes, and the whole neighborhood seemed to be burning. Deputy Fire Chief Robert Lindgren shook his head in frustration.
There's one down the street, it's just starting. They don't even have any apparatus down there yet. 2 blocks further down there's another one. 2 blocks further down there's another one. They're all over the place.
Manpower?
Oh, we got the manpower, but they're bouncing them all over the place, and they're taking a shellacking. They're taking a real beating. It's, we're doing all we can do.
What about physically? Are the people bothering you?
No, we haven't had any problems like that. Physically, the fires are taking us physically. Most of these fellas worked all night, and they're still working today.
Tough night.
It's a bad night, very bad.
It was a very bad night and a bad day for a lot of people. The owner of this small clothing store watched the store burn after it had been looted. He said he didn't understand what was going on.
What do you want me to think? I don't know. I don't know what to do.
Mayor Beam issued a request tonight urging religious leaders of all faiths to go to their local precincts, ride patrol cars with police, and appeal to community leaders to keep their communities calm. But so far, many areas are far from quiet. Steve?
Thank you, Frank. As we said, while police battle the looters, New York's firefighters have their hands full as well. About 25 firemen were injured fighting a blaze at the intersection of Broadway and Hancock Street in the Bushwick section of Brooklyn. 5 of those firemen were admitted to Wyckoff Heights Hospital. Late tonight, they were listed in satisfactory condition. Some 20 other firefighters were treated and released. Late this evening, a 5-alarm fire raged out of control at the intersection of Stone and Truxton Avenue in Brooklyn's Brownsville section. The flames were visible for at least 6 miles. The fire reportedly started in a factory, then jumped the street and began burning private homes and cars nearby. So far, there have been no injuries reported in that fire. And firemen say they're having trouble fighting the fire because of low water pressure in the area due to open hydrants. Getting information from the area has been difficult, to say the least. A little while ago, one of our reporters got through to the Brooklyn Fire Dispatcher's office. The dispatcher said he could not talk to us. He said he had 4 major fires burning at one time and not enough men to handle it. Police have been advising people to stay out of the Brownsville and Bushwick areas of Brooklyn all day. The fire department issued some statistics late this evening. They say they handled more than 1,600 alarms during the first 12 hours of the blackout. Almost 2/3, that's 2/3 of those alarms, they say, were false alarms. And as we mentioned, several fires continue to burn in Brooklyn right now, one tragic result of New York's blackout of 1977.
Steve, New York jails are so overcrowded tonight that the city's most infamous lockup has been reopened to handle the crush. We'll have that report in just a moment, and later on, we'll tell you about some of the other news around the world today, along with complete sports and weather as Action News continues.
Would you like to come in? With gas, you can't cook long without exhaust fans. So for many early risers, coffee was the only solace. But Casey's Kitchen's owner, Bill Passion's customers took it in the traditional fashion of New Yorkers.
They were very good about it, and they waited for the coffees, and they were very patient. And it was just a lot of fun. Everybody took it good-naturedly.
But the power didn't come back on in other parts of Manhattan until later. So the people on Roosevelt Island missed having their tram ride to the city this morning because the Manhattan station is 3 blocks shy of 62nd Street, where the juice stopped flowing. Luckily, both cabins of the tram were in their respective stations when the blackout happened last night, but an auxiliary power unit would have brought them in anyway. Naturally, thousands and thousands of New Yorkers ignored the mayor's early morning declaration that New York City was closed for the day. But many folks who did make it to work found themselves locked out of buildings with no elevators to take them to their offices or air conditioning to keep them cool. All in all, not a very pleasant experience at best. But then some people get a kick out of anything. This is Bob O'Brien.
And after a very hectic night, Mayor Beam lashed out at Con Ed, saying he was outraged, and like other New Yorkers, he never thought he'd see a rerun of 65. Anthony Preisendorf reports.
The mayor was tired, and he showed it. A sleepless night and countless interruptions had etched the lines more deeply in his face. Surrounded by his commissioners, the mayor walked into City Hall's Blue Room, lit by an emergency generator that would later be loaned to the city morgue, to assail Con Ed. At best, Beam said Con Ed has shown gross negligence. At worst, the mayor added something far more serious. For the mayor running for re-election, Con Ed, the utility New Yorkers love to hate, had temporarily replaced crime as the #1 political issue.
We've seen our citizens subjected to violence, vandalism, theft, and discomfort. The blackout has threatened our safety and has seriously impacted our economy. We've been needlessly subjected to a night of terror in many communities that have been wantonly looted and burned. The cost, when finally tallied, will be enormous. I believe the seriousness of this blackout requires special investigation by the city itself.
Less than 4 hours later, Charles Luce, Con Ed's board chairman, a proper man who shed his jacket so that he could relate to the city without lights, responded. He gave the crowded, sweaty news conference a complete rundown of what happened last night and an explanation of why it happened and why it could happen again. The only time Luce seemed to lose his composure was when I asked him to respond to Beam's attacks that Con Ed was guilty of gross negligence and that somehow the utility was responsible for the night of looting and street disorders.
I don't think we were guilty of gross negligence at all. I think that the protective equipment we had on our system is good, it's modern, it's comparable to what other utilities have. Our machines were protected last night. In the first blackout, our machines didn't have the protection to keep them lubricated as they rolled down. We had that last night, and as a result...
And that's what happened. 450 were being held in the Manhattan criminal court pens, designed for half that number.
Naturally, because of the ventilation and the lack of lights we're providing under emergency generator systems, it's chaotic. It's under control, though.
Mattresses are now being moved in for the 200 that remain in the pens, which are not intended for overnight use. Earlier in the day, Manhattan Borough President and mayoral candidate Percy Sutton objected to how the pen prisoners were being treated. I accompanied him on a tour of the pens. 40 men to a cell, 60 by 18, with, like the rest of us, no running water, no lights. Inside, self-confessed looters told me they were proud of what they stole, from packages of baby diapers lying in the streets, motorcycles, strands of pearls to television sets. One told me he was right in hitting the city when it was down, because the blackout was an open chance he deserved. Next to him, a 16-year-old fellow looter from Harlem agreed. We're at the bottom, he said. Well, for today, Percy Sutton was one person who was in agreement with him.
They just came and snatched me up off the street.
We could have brought in judges from all over the city, Supreme Court justices, civil court justices, Court of Claims justices, and they could have all been working last night.
There are plenty of judges. There's no shortage of judges or prosecutors.
Percy Sutton, who's right behind you, said that the judges could have been sent to the precincts to do this business instead of holding up everybody in the cells and only processing about 6 cases or arraigning 6 cases before 11:45 this afternoon.
Well, there's no provision for facilities at the precincts, and the precincts are also loaded with defendants, but the cases here are moving as rapidly, I think, as can be done.
Well, now that the lights are back on at the Manhattan Criminal Court, 3 judges will be working until 1 a.m. at least, and the clerk there tells me in all 100 cases will be cleared for the day. But even after arraignments, correction officials say they're expecting about 90% of those suspects back in overcrowded jails to await trial.
Thank you, Christy. During and after the blackout, transportation has been a major headache for most New Yorkers, and one that won't go away quickly. All 3 metropolitan area airports are open and flights are on schedule. The New Jersey commuter lines and PATH trains are operating on schedule, but the good news ends there. The Hudson and Harlem division lines of Conrail are out of service. As power is restored, they hope to operate 1 train per half hour during rush hour tomorrow, but only as far as 125th Street. Buses will take passengers to Midtown. On the Long Island Railroad, there is no service out of Brooklyn. Out of Penn Station, there are trains hourly on each of the main lines. It's hoped that most service to Penn Station will operate in the morning. As for the subways, the Transit Authority reports subways are operating with extreme difficulty. As trains are certified for service, test runs are made, but these are not on a schedule, and it's a long wait for trains on any of the lines. A number of subway tunnels, notably the Independent and the IRT 42nd Street tunnels, are not in service because of water collecting on the tracks. The Transit Authority says it hopes, I repeat, hopes, it will have the subways running at 80% of capacity for tomorrow's rush hour. Frank Casey went to the MTA Command Center to find out about the problems. Frankie?
Pat, the subway control center at J Street in Brooklyn is waiting for the go-ahead to get the trains rolling, but the demand for service has to be balanced against the need for safety. As power is restored, the signal blocks must be tested one by one. Air pressure in the cylinders which operate the switches has to be pumped up. As for the cars themselves, they have to be checked one by one to certify for service. One major problem is the rectifiers that change the Con Ed AC power to the DC high voltage which drives the train motors. Many of these have blown and have to be fixed. As the power outage began last night, the command center sent word to all trains, stop at the nearest station. One superintendent described it to me.
Our first indication of power trouble was the motorman reporting the signals fading out and coming back, and then going out completely and coming back. This indicated to us more than the power reduction Con Edison had notified us of. And my counterpart on the PM here, the PM superintendent, ordered all trains to operate into the nearest station and stand by there till we found out what was going on. Now, some lines we had as much as 3 minutes to get this done. Some lines we only had 30 seconds. And with this short time, we had 7 trains caught out of stations that had to be evacuated.
Only 7 trains were caught between stations?
Right, only 7 out of approximately 150 to 200 trains. We're preparing to go back as Con Edison gives us the power. We're cleaning up our trouble with water conditions that we normally get when the pumps stop operating due to a power failure.
When a complex system like the New York City subway goes, getting it back up again is not as simple as throwing a switch. Superintendent Smith told me about some of the problems they face.
When the system operator tells us, to our power department, that they have power from Con Edison and they can restore. The desk train master is the only man with authority to restore the power. He knows where he can take the power on, where we have people working on the track clearing up water situations, or, as some cases we had last night, where we were actually evacuating passengers to the track.
Getting the subway system back to its normal pace will be at least an all-night affair. Batteries in the stalled trains take a couple of hours to recharge, and then there is the problem of getting the crews to the trains. Unsnarling the subway mess is one of the city's biggest tasks in this emergency. It doesn't help when other city services like police and fire are also being pressed to the limit. Steve?
Thank you, Frank. Now some vital information of a different kind. If you're wondering what to do with food from the freezer and refrigerator that was at room temperature for a few hours during that blackout, the city's Department of Consumer Affairs and the Food and Drug Administration advise extreme caution in eating or refreezing that food simply because of the danger of food poisoning. Meat, dairy products, custards, puddings, gravies, and mayonnaise-type dressings are better to be thrown out. Food from the freezer that still contains ice crystals, especially vegetables, can be refrozen, although the flavors may change, but highly perishable foods like liver or shellfish should not be refrozen. In fact, if the food is warm to the touch, throw it away. And anything you do, cook it thoroughly to kill all of the bacteria. And a good point to remember, if you're not sure, just throw it out. It's certainly better than food poisoning. Pat?
Beside the inconvenience, New York City lost millions of dollars as a result of the blackout. With Wall Street shut down, the city was out $5 million in expected stock transfer and sales taxes. The overall loss for everyone connected with the market and for the worldwide financial community could be into the hundreds of millions of dollars. More about that in Bill Littauer's business report.
There's been a lot of talk recently about the decline of New York, the businesses that are moving out, the brokerage firms moving across the Hudson. But don't underestimate the impact this blackout had. We'll probably never know just how much it cost. The city estimates that lost business alone will run into the hundreds of millions of dollars. Many of the biggest banks in the world were closed. The stock and commodity markets were unable to operate. New York City lost $5 million in sales and transfer taxes alone. This is still the financial capital of the world, and when business grinds to a halt in New York, the impact is felt not only across the country, but around the globe. Businessmen around the world trust New York. The phones work. The mails move regularly. We aren't surprised by crippling wildcat strikes. How many multi-million-dollar international deals may have been held up from Japan to Saudi Arabia because the bankers, the brokers, the shippers, or even the technicians that make the computers hum couldn't get to work in New York today? And that doesn't include the millions lost in the looting, arson, and vandalism that took place in the streets. This blackout may have hit New York, but it must have been felt around the world.
Coming up, we'll hear from some of our reporters and staff about how individual New Yorkers coped with the crisis.
And science editor Roger Field will compare the blackout of 1965 to the blackout of 1977 when we continue.
This is Repo Auto. Job here.
Now, don't panic.
Is head of our Mexico desde 290. This is the best medicine for me, Zip.
But was given a dime. And there are the motorists who courteously gave the other guy the right of way for a change. And how often during the long night do we reach for money for the cigarette machines that didn't work, or grope for a taste of water in the coolers that had no power? All the things we so often take for granted weren't there. But once again, we survived. While last night was one of New York's darkest hours, in many respects, it was also one of its brightest. From Brooklyn Heights, this is Marvin Scott reporting.
What size luxury? Your Lincoln Mercury dealer offers 3 luxury car choices. Lincoln Versailles, a new smaller-sized luxury car, similar in size to the finest European luxury sedans. Continental Mark V, a personal-sized luxury car. Lincoln Continental, a standard by which luxury cars are judged. What size luxury? Versailles, Mark V, Lincoln Continental. 3 beautiful and distinctive ways to express your individuality and good taste. Now, at the Sign of the Cat.
Bloomingdale's presents How to Be a Hit in Your Bedroom. Hit number 12,
Brighten things up. Sleep with Cacharel. Cacharel Chant de Fleur floral pattern sheets, complete with matching comforter and sham. Twin size $6.99. Regularly $8.50. Matching comforter $55. Regularly $75. Or Cacharel's.
Down on East 78th Street came a bagpiper, and behind him a growing entourage of people holding bottles and cans as instruments. When the blackout hit, the entire Action News staff was mobilized, and editors and staffers joined regular reporters in the streets to find out what was happening. Our critic Jeffrey Lyons went to the theater district. Jeff, what happened when the lights go out on Broadway?
Well, Patty, it was almost like a scene from A Clockwork Orange or On the Beach. I went to all the theaters with the knowledge that one TV station was supposed to show a movie called Blackout last night at 4 o'clock in the morning. We were supposed to show The Big Sleep at midnight. There were ironies aplenty. Another movie that was on last night was a picture called Made for Each Other, which has a reference to the 1965 blackout in it, incredibly. I went around to all the Broadway theaters first and got some interesting stories. At O Calcutta, their clothes were off when the blackout hit, and they couldn't get upstairs to get their clothes, so the audience pitched in with appropriate garments so they could get home, at least within the bounds of decency. At the King and I, the blackout hit at the intermission, and the cast came out in their robes, not in their costumes, and started dancing, and sort of the people in the audience, because they started playing dancing music. Over at the Schubert, at a chorus line, they were told to save their tickets, and a lady from Hawaii told me she'll stay in New York as long as it takes to see a chorus line. At Shenandoah, John Cullum calmed the audience with singing a song called Freedom, which is the big song from that because there was some difficulty there. And all along Broadway, Mummenschanz, it's the mime show, and the actors finally talked to the audience to calm them. The only time in the history of that show that happened. So Broadway really adjusted to it. Movie theaters also, The Deep and Rocky, people came out and were happy about it.
It's nice when the other side of a crisis there's just a little bit of humor and a little bit of fun. Thank goodness. Steve? I think.
Are we not going to talk to Peter?
Oh, Peter, I'm sorry. I wasn't neglecting you.
Here, so
Excuse me.
That's going to happen.
Excuse me. I'm not used to your being here.
Thanks a lot. Well, the first thing is, it must have been quite a night for bagpipers. You were saying that something about 72nd Street.
78th Street, a bagpiper was marching down the street.
I got a call from a friend of mine who said that if possible, I should come up to the west side, 57th and 7th Avenue. There were 12 guys in kilts. You live in that neighborhood, did you hear that?
Heard them, yeah.
12 guys in kilts going down the street in bagpipes. I was over by Grand Central to see what conditions were like there, and one of the cops told me that there was some bagpiper roaming the corridors, like the Canterville Ghost, playing the pipes.
In Grand Central Station?
Central Station. They never found him, but all I heard was the sound of some guy doing the bagpipes. You know, and then, well, down at Grand Central, I ran into a couple that had just gotten off the Circle Line cruise. They were on it when the lights went out, and they said it was very interesting to sit back and watch Manhattan blink on and off and suddenly die. And one couple was looking up at the 59th Street Bridge and it disappeared. And all they saw were the lights of the cars going over them, so it looked sort of weird. One other thing that hit me was an old woman outside Grand Central. She was sitting on one of the old fire stands, and she was there with her little bag. She was very well dressed, not a bag lady. Just a woman who had gotten trapped in the city with a cane and sitting there, and I walked up and asked if I could help her with anything. I had to speak up again because she couldn't hear me. When she finally did, she said, no thanks, I've been through 3 wars and I think I can manage this.
I'm glad we came back to you. I'm sorry I forgot.
That's all right.
Steve?
Back to work.
All right, thank you all. When the lights flickered off last night, there was no help from the heavens either. Our skies were covered by heavy clouds, and on the streets there was an inky darkness. In the 1965 blackout.
The fire damage, the enormous cost of the rampage of looting. The best guess is the great blackout in New York will cost up to the hundreds of millions of dollars, and that's without calculating the flight of capital as many businessmen think of the price of inconvenience and as the last of the last straws, and rethink the price of staying on to possibly face it all over again. We'll have more on the New York ordeal as our 10 o'clock news continues.
Here's news about a really important new sound. It's the beeps of Radio Relay, the radio paging service that keeps you in touch 24 hours a day, 7 days a week.
Power line and a crucial substation, both directly north of the city. Together, they accounted for roughly 1/3 of all power reaching the city, and by going out, they overloaded the Ravenswood plant in Queens. All 5 boroughs and Westchester went dark, but this time the domino effect stopped there.
Now, there are several reasons why the blackout was contained this time. In engineering terms, under-frequency relays let power pool members shed load. Now, that's technical talk. What it means in ordinary language is that the network of generating stations now have sophisticated switches between them that act like fuses. They open up when a section gets in trouble and its power plants start grinding slower and slower and slower. These switches sense the slowdown and disconnect power to the troubled area. These days, there are also more power lines and more generators. Now, since the last great blackout, the new technique has had its ups and downs. It did great in 1971 when a similar disaster affected only part of Long Island. It did poorly last year in Utah when an electrical problem blacked out the whole state and part of Wyoming. And it fared not so well recently in Florida when 2 outages hit the southern part of that state. So the power system has been improved since the blackout of '65, but that didn't prevent the past 24 hours from being a nightmare for residents of New York City. A main reason is because our power lines are all buried underground. This means they're insulated and cooled with oil. Now, that oil is circulated by means of electric pumps. So unless you have electricity to drive those pumps, you can't use the power lines. And without the power lines, you don't get the electricity. Obviously, New York has an electrical startup problem you don't have anywhere else. But engineers did limit the power failure mainly to the metropolitan area, and apparently what caused it was much more than just a relay pooping out. Pat, you were up there at Indian Point. What did they tell you?
Well, I'm not much of a science buff, Roger, as you know. I talked with them trying to clarify for the first time, because they claimed they had heard a lot of inaccurate information, the sequence of events. It seemed that it was more of a natural...
I'll tell the truth. The Cards and the Phillies 5-5 at the end of 9½. The Braves 7, the Reds zip. That's after 8 innings. George Foster has hit 3 home runs. The Dodgers 2, the Astros 2 at the end of 6½, and they're pulling me off.
Why did you give me credit? Anyway, there was plenty of power in Milwaukee this afternoon, namely from the bat of Reggie Jackson. He had 2 home runs, and George Zeber had one as the Yankees beat the Brewers 6-3. Ed Figueroa got the win with some help from Sparky Lyle, who did not fizz out. Tonight, it's the Red Sox leading the Indians 7-4 in the 8th inning. The Orioles have a 2-1 lead over the Rangers. That is in the 6th inning. And the Royals are leading the Tigers 3-2 in the 6th inning. This afternoon, it was the White Sox beating the Blue Jays 2-1 as Ken Kravik pitched a 3-hitter. Later, Seattle is at California. Bill?
Fred Marty set a course record at 64 today to take the lead at the Pleasant Valley Golf Classic in Sutton, Massachusetts. Ray Floyd and Dale Hayes are at 67. Tom Watson, Jack Nicklaus at 68, along with Tom Weiskopf and George Burns. Hugh B. Green had 72. Senor.
This is normally the time we would be showing you the Roosevelt race and the OTB results, but of course there was no OTB today. They didn't have any power to work with. So that's it for our abbreviated sports tonight. Coming up next, Stewart remembers the 1965 blackout, and we'll have an update on our latest one. For Bill Mazer, I'm Brian Madden.
2 degrees. It'll be clear and warm tonight. Low temperature in the low 70s. Partly sunny and hot tomorrow. More humid and a temperature around 90 degrees. I'm John Vitiver. Here's more of your music on Y97.
Ethical. A struggle truly to imitate the ideal. And that...
You can put up to 10 years of news. The power was not restored until after 5 this evening, while the staff is preparing a 64.
I'm really going to miss this place.
It's called... There's no better done.
Horas, pero luego se cancelaron todos los vuelos de entrada hasta la madrugada. Lo mismo ocurrió...
Place.
In the evening takes the chill away.
Power outage has now lasted a full 24 hours in the hardest hit areas of New York City. Power
Today at 8 p.m.
Share by the window that we found.
But there are people and companies who do more than guess about the future.
You could win a vacation too.
Jim sets out to clear an honest cop.
Might win any of 14 fabulous vacations, even a trip around the world.
Charter flight 4956, boarding at gate 12.
The American Express Vacation Sweepstakes. It can happen to you at the new American Express Travel Service Bureau, now on the mezzanine at Bloomingdale.
Nivea, 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 from your fingers to your toes. You got just one set of permanent clothes. And with a little daily care, it'll last 3 years of wear. Years of wear. Looking soft, feeling smooth, looking cute. Take care of your birthday, take care of your birthday, take care of your birthday soon. Nivea!
Whatever skin you're in. We didn't need the 92-degree high under blazing sunshine this day of all days, but that's the way it was. And we'll have a clear, warm night, hopefully with no loss of vital electrical power, so the air conditioners will probably be humming again. Tomorrow also, we'll have another hot, sunny day, but more humid, and therefore a little more uncomfortable than today. There's a chance of afternoon rain, perhaps in summer thunder showers tomorrow. It looks like a hot, sticky weekend all around New York metropolitan area. Hot on Saturday, Sunday warm, sunny, and less humid again. And the next work week should begin with fair skies, temperatures in the 80s.
Where were you when the lights went out in '65? President Lyndon Johnson was recovering from a gallbladder operation, the fighting was fierce in Vietnam, and John Lindsay had just been elected mayor. Stuart Klein recalls the Big Apple blackout of 12 years ago.
A Scandinavian Airlines passenger plane was circling to land after an 8-hour flight from Copenhagen when pilot Carl Lofsted looked down and suddenly Kennedy Airport disappeared. The time was 5:27 p.m., Tuesday, November 9th, 1965, and at that instant, the lights went out. Within 15 minutes, a massive power failure had plunged into darkness an area from Canada to Pennsylvania containing 30 million people. And hardest hit was the Big Apple. It was the height of the evening rush hour. 600,000 people were aboard subway cars when the power failed. Some stayed there for 13 hours. Another 100,000 railroad commuters were stranded. Elevators in Manhattan's fabled skyscrapers suddenly became pockets of terror. Yet, at the outset of the blackout, the mood of the eerie, darkened metropolis was amiable. Citizens directed traffic, the drinks were on the house at numerous bars, volunteers from a nearby restaurant raced to St. Vincent's Hospital to manually operate iron lungs. During the entire blackout, only a dozen stores were looted, only 90 persons were arrested. Most people tried to help their neighbor. A man climbed 37 floors in the Empire State Building to bring insulin to a diabetic office worker. Police walked a tunnel under the East River, bringing coffee and sandwiches to stranded subway riders. There were some very chummy parties in offices and hotels, although stories of a sharp increase in the birth rate 9 months after the blackout were exaggerated. Not all was sweetness and light. Many cab drivers demanded a flat rate of $25 to go anywhere in the city. Hustlers suddenly appeared on Broadway selling flashlights for $3, candles at $1 apiece. And as the night wore on, the blackout lost its charm for tens of thousands who were cold, hungry, dirty, and stranded. They slept on flattened cardboard cartons at Grand Central Terminal, on church pews at St. Patrick's Cathedral, on the lobby floor of the Waldorf Astoria. The bare floors of National Guard armories became beds for thousands. But in the main, New Yorkers coped. A crowd inside the Roosevelt Hotel happily chanted, for no reason at all, "We want Wilkie." And subway riders on a stalled IND train under 8th Avenue were astounded to find themselves entertained by a mysterious bagpipe player. And when power was fully restored, 13 and a half hours...
The last areas to come online, parts of Manhattan, the Upper East Side, and scattered parts of Queens and Brooklyn. The outlook for tomorrow morning's rush hour is pretty good. The big problem will be traffic lights left out of phase by the blackout, but engineers will start resetting them in the morning. Subways were rolling by late this afternoon, with the exception of the IND lines that had been affected by the Brooklyn-Queens power problems, and they were normal by about 8 p.m. The commuter lines say that trains will be running normally in the morning, and that the 2 East River tunnels have now been operating for some hours. There will be extra personnel on the streets helping traffic in the morning. 250 state troopers tonight join city police in trying to restore order to the now brightening Gotham. Governor Kerry has asked for federal disaster relief for the city, but he did not put the National Guard on alert tonight, as Mayor Beam had asked. Jim?
Well, what went wrong? The Federal Power Commission is under orders right now from President Carter to find out and to do so quickly. They'll hold a hearing here in the city tomorrow morning. Mr. Carter's order came with the request of an angry Mayor Beam.
Given what occurred 12 years ago, Con Ed's performance is at the very least gross negligence, and at the worst, far more serious. Early this morning, I had requested the Federal Power Commission to conduct investigations to determine why this city has been so devastated by a blackout, which seemingly was never to occur again, according to Con Ed. We've seen our citizens subjected to violence, vandalism, theft, and discomfort. The blackout has threatened our safety and has seriously impacted our economy. We've been needlessly subjected to a night of terror in many communities that have been wantonly looted and burned. The cost, when finally tallied, will be enormous.
And Mayor Beam is not leaving that job up to the government. He is appointing his own special board of inquiry. David?
Jim, of course, the man who bears the brunt of the federal, state, and city criticism is Con Ed Board Chairman Charles Luce, who gave the utility side of the story at an afternoon news conference.
I don't think we were guilty of gross negligence at all. I think that the protective equipment we had on our system is good, it's modern, it's comparable to what other utilities have. Our machines were protected last night.
Worst in some. It was perhaps some self-defeating way of getting even, but even before the night.
Now because of the state police taking over our obligations on the limited access highways.
Do you foresee any need for the state police to go into the streets at all?
The only arrangement that's been made is that we would have the state police enable us to use our highway patrols on street. What will happen later on, we can't foretell.
How long a shift do you plan to have them on?
Well, it'll be a 12-hour shift.
We'll run until the highway patrol can take over again in the morning, and if necessary, we'll be back tomorrow night. Now, who will make the determination as to when your services may no longer be needed?
The superintendent of state police.
Major Leary concedes that his troopers are not very familiar with the streets of New York, but he does not believe they will be needed there. Police officials feel that any problems in the streets can be handled by regular city cops and the highway patrol.
You have both your own radio equipment as well as radio equipment we've furnished. So if there is any problem, get on the air with it. We'll obtain information for you to overcome any problems that may occur. Advice or assistance as you may need it.
A highway patrolman told us that there will probably be at least 5 highway patrol cars in each borough at all times. The highest concentration, of course, will be in the most volatile areas of Manhattan, Brooklyn, the Bronx, and Queens. Now, we don't mean, of course, to create any kind of unnecessary sense of urgency. We hope there's no violence in the streets tonight, but at least it's comforting to know that the city is prepared. Larry?
Spencer, Con Ed's public relations people are working overtime tonight trying to explain the embarrassing walkout. John Johnson has been listening all day and night to those explanations, especially from the Con Ed chief, the chairman of the board, and John has this report.
An act of God outage, lightning, buying too much power from outside sources, low oil pressure. All reasons, according to Con Ed Chairman Charles Luce, for the Con Ed power system to collapse like dominoes, causing a blackout that was supposedly all but impossible.
Predicted diversionary actions designed to take the heat off of cooperating looters. And those looters also had a field day. In one Brooklyn neighborhood, they boldly wheeled a piano from a local music store, then sought ways to move it. Police were either absent or unwilling to interfere. Earlier, a raging 3-alarm raced through a combination furniture and clothing store on Broadway in Brooklyn's Bushwick section. This as looters surged through nearby streets, taking everything in sight. The man who owned that store was dumbstruck.
25 years I've been in business. I got wiped out in one day. The cops were standing in front of the store this morning with me. At least 30 policemen. They're just taking out the stuff, all the furniture, just standing there. They couldn't do a thing about it. Just send out the National Guard to show tear gas, protect every individual. What are we paying taxes for? What's going on? Wiped out after 25 years.
Yeah? 25 years. 25 years. I like that speech, my friend.
Only a small percentage of the onlookers actually participated in the looting, but many others, mostly young people, literally cheered the looters on.
Well, don't you realize you're ripping off and burning down your own community? Yo, this is something, you know, everybody got to do, you know, because of the situation, man. Situations like that, man. Ain't no man in the city, no like that.
Yeah, well, look, you're burning buildings that everyone lives in. You're burning homes. Why?
The man will not a home. Then a home now, it's no explanation for now. You know, that's just stupidity. But the stores, I can dig that now. Hey, you know.
Yeah.
That's
have you ripped up anything yourself?
Nah, baby. I'm just walking and looking.
And look.
When my time come, hey.
Miles away on Manhattan's Upper West Side, the debris-filled streets teemed with people. But unlike the chaotic Bushwick section of Brooklyn, there was no reported daylight looting. Beefed-up patrols from the 24th Precinct kept a tight rein on the neighborhood. At the precinct itself, where all leaves and vacations were canceled and all offices were working 12-hour tours, Lieutenant David Velez ruefully cited some shocking statistics that reflected the scope of last night's violence.
There were 138 arrests made approximately, and we suffered damage to approximately 50 stores, mostly on Broadway between 86 and 110, where our business community is. And some of the stores were it's from slight to heavy damage on some of the stores.
One of the stores hardest hit on Amsterdam Avenue, a hardware store owned by Leonard Altman. But compared to Le Mans Boutique, the damage at Altman's was minor. Rampaging looters literally devastated the chic three-level men's shop that catered mainly to the area's well-heeled business and professional men. Somehow, they did manage to overlook a penny in the cash register, deliberately perhaps. But owner Kenneth Morgan says they took just about everything else. How bad a loss is this?
Well, did you hear the lady? She said it was unbelievable, which it is. The loss is total. I think there is one shoe left in the store, and it was fully stocked. The furnitures and fixtures, most of them are gone, are broken.
Do you think you could ever start up again?
That's what I was thinking about, and I think that we will. Yeah.
With the return of even partial electric power, police say the situation should return to normal. And with the beefed-up patrols and the state police reserves called into the city, officials believe the message is loud and clear. The end of violence is upon us. This is Chris Borkin, Channel 2 News reporting.
And while tonight did not see the end of violence, it was nothing at all the way it was last night. John Tesh will have a report on that, and consumer editor John Stossel will have some advice about all that food warming in your refrigerator as our coverage of Blackout 77 continues.
Control center, these people are talking to modem.
Well, it started right now. In fact,
got a box.
Outrage that at this hour, the city of New York is still without power, and the prospects for restoration of full electrical service remain vague as far as Con Ed is concerned. And given what occurred 12 years ago, Con Ed's performance is at the very least gross negligence, and at the worst far more serious. We've seen our citizens subjected to violence, vandalism, theft, and discomfort. The blackout has threatened our safety and has seriously impacted our economy. We've been needlessly subjected to a night of terror in many communities that have been wantonly looted and burned.
Tonight, the mayor says he wants convicted looters punished to the fullest extent of the law. Well, the cost of human suffering and inconvenience can never be measured, but the cost in dollars can. City Hall officials say that losses will run into hundreds of millions of dollars due to losses to business, city taxes, and overtime for police and firefighters. While the Transit Authority is struggling to get its trains back in service, Eyewitness News finds it's getting off to a pretty shaky start. This evening, we checked the 59th Street Columbus Circle stop and found few people waiting for trains. Ironically, there were more people waiting for Brooklyn-bound trains that were not yet running south southbound to Brooklyn.
Started off at 110th Street.